Welcome back to another deep dive into the hidden corners of Tamriel, where tonight we'll be exploring the ancient traditions and sacred bonds that have sustained the companions of Jorrvaskr for over 500 years. Tonight's journey takes us into the heart of the circle itself, the shadowed councils, the beast blood rituals, the shield brother oaths sworn over crossed blades, and the funeral pyres that send warriors to Sovngarde's distant halls. We'll uncover the succession rites that choose Harbingers, the training hierarchies that shape whelps into legends, and the weight of traditions that stretch back to Ysgramor's blood-soaked landing on these Nordic shores. The wind cuts sharp across the plains district of Whiterun, carrying with it the distant ring of hammer on anvil from the Skyforge, perched high above the city like a crown of smoke and sparks. Within the mead hall of Jorrvaskr, that upturned longship of Nordic timber whose keel has rested on this ground since before the very stones of Whiterun were laid, the circle gathers in shadow and firelight. 5 seats, no more, no less. A tradition carved not in stone, but in blood and oath and the weight of 5 centuries. The position of Harbinger stands empty tonight, for Kodlak Whitemane lies in state, his body not yet committed to flame, and already the murmurs begin about who will inherit not a throne, but a burden. The Harbinger succession carries no crown, commands no armies, and passes to no child. By birthright. It is perhaps the most Nordic of all traditions in this way, earned not inherited, chosen not crowned, and heavy as the armor of Ysgramor himself. When the circle meets to select their next Harbinger, they do so without vote or formal deliberation in the manner of jarls and kings. Instead, they gather in the lower level of Jorrvaskr, where the smell of mead mingles with old wood and weapon oil, where the heads of ancient beasts stare down from walls with glass eyes, and they speak until consensus emerges like the first light of dawn. Inevitable, undeniable. There are no protocols written in any tome, no procedures outlined in any charter. The selection happens in the space between words, in the acknowledgement of who already leads without title, who others follow without question. Kodlak Whitemane was not the first to bear the burden, nor will his successor be the last, unless the doom of Alduin's return truly heralds the end of all cycles. Before Kodlak, Askar held the position, and before Askar came others whose names are carved in memory but grow fainter with each passing generation. The line stretches back through the ages to Ysgramor himself, that first Harbinger. Though he bore no such title, he was simply Harbinger of everything that followed. 500 warriors sailed with him from Atmora, and when they made landfall on these shores, they brought with them the traditions that would birth the companions. The organization has changed much since those blood-soaked days of the return, when every elf encountered was an enemy, and the conquest of Skyrim was not a historical fact, but a daily struggle of survival and vengeance. The original 500 were organized along Atmoran lines, with captains commanding the crews of individual longships, each captain sworn to Ysgramor as their high chief. Some scholars claim there were 22 ships that made the journey, others say 17, and still others insist the exact number is lost to the mists of the Sea of Ghosts, drowned with the ships that never reached these shores. What remains certain is that this naval structure dissolved gradually as the conquest succeeded, as permanent settlements replaced temporary camps, as the need for swift raiding parties gave way to the need for a more enduring martial tradition. By the time Jorrvaskr was constructed, legend claims it was built from one of Ysgramor's own vessels, the Jorrvaskr. Though whether this is truth or mythology, even the companions cannot say with certainty. The organization had already begun its transformation into something uniquely Skyrim. The circle as it exists in the Fourth Era represents a distillation of this ancient command structure. 5 members, 5 voices, 5 souls bound by secrets that would horrify the silver-blooded who preach Talos worship in Markarth and the priests who tend the Gildergreen in Whiterun's Wind District. The number 5 is no accident, some whisper it, corresponds to the 5 original captains who survived the initial landing at Hassaric Head and stood beside Ysgramor when he swore to cleanse this land. Others claim it mirrors the 5 totems of the ancient Atmaran animal pantheon: the hawk, the wolf, the snake, the moth, and the whale, though such pagan beliefs are rarely spoken of in modern Skyrim, where the 9 divines hold sway, or 8 if one is Thalmor and believes their lies about Talos. The truth, as with so many companion traditions, is kept within the circle itself, and those who join learn that questions about why invite only the answer, because it has always been so. Entry to the circle comes through a ritual that transforms as much as it elevates. In the depths beneath Jorrvaskr, in the Underforge, that the city's guards and merchants and priests know nothing about, the beast blood flows, werewolf blood, drawn from those already cursed, mixed in the great basin that predates even the companions' arrival. For the Underforge is older still, a remnant of something that came before, a place of power that called to Ysgramor's people when they first crested the hill and saw the plains spread before them like a promise. The transformation is not merely physical. When a companion drinks the blood, when the curse takes hold and their body convulses with the change, they cross a threshold from which there is no easy return. They become circle, yes, but they also become other, no longer quite human, bound to the hunting moon and the beast within. The circle meets in secret, always 5, unless death or departure has diminished their number, and then they meet to choose a replacement. They do not vote in the manner of Jarls selecting a high king. They do not draw lots or consult the gods through divination. Instead, they know when the time comes to expand the circle, when a warrior has proven themselves not merely capable, but exceptional, when they have shown the steel to bear the weight of the secret, the existing members simply recognize what is already true. The invitation itself is a formality, though one conducted with grave ceremony in the Underforge's flickering torchlight, where shadows dance like the spirits of ancient warriors watching to ensure the traditions are maintained. Shield sibling bonds run deeper than blood in the companions, and for good reason. Blood can betray, can thin with distance and time, but an oath sworn before witnesses, with hands clasped over crossed blades, creates something that even death struggles to sever. When 2 companions bind themselves as shield siblings, the ceremony is simple but absolute. They stand before the Harbinger, or, in the Harbinger's absence, before the most senior member of the circle, and they speak the words that have been spoken for 500 years, with only minor variations to account for the evolution of the Nordic tongue. The oath commits them to fight beside each other, to avenge each other's death, should one fall, to share property and inheritance as though they shared parentage, and to maintain the bond until both have departed for Sovngarde or until one formally releases the other, a release that, in all the recorded history of the companions, has occurred fewer than a dozen times. The property inheritance clause is no mere formality. When Skjor fell to the Silver Hand, his weapons, his armor, his personal effects, all passed not to distant relatives in some forgotten Nordic village, but to his shield sibling, whose name is spoken with respect in Jorrvaskr even now. The companions understand that their true family is not the family of their birth, but the family forged in the training yard, tested in contract work, and sealed in blood and oath. A shield sibling who allows their partner's death to go unavenged becomes worse than kinslayer. In the eyes of the companions, they become oathbreaker, and an oathbreaker has no place in Jorrvaskr, no seat at the mead table, no hope of reaching Sovngarde's Hall of Heroes. The death revenge obligation is taken with deadly seriousness. When the Silver Hand murdered members of the companions, when they dared strike at the circle itself, the response was not calculated political maneuvering or appeals to the Jarl's justice. The response was steel and claw and fury, was hunting expeditions that crossed the breadth of Skyrim, was blood for blood until the scales balanced or every Silver Hand agent lay dead. Some among the younger companions whispered that this was excessive, that it risked bringing the wrath of Jarls and the law down upon them. The circle's response was silence, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words, the silence that says, "This is who we are. This is what it means to be companion. And if you cannot accept this, then you have mistaken our mead hall for a hireling service." Before one becomes a companion, before one even dreams of the circle, one begins as whelp. The term carries no shame in Jorrvaskr. Every warrior who has ever walked these halls began as whelp, including those who now sit the circle. The initial trial period varies in length depending on the individual's skill, their aptitude for following orders, and their willingness to embrace the companion's way. Some whelps earn their full status in mere months, displaying such natural talent and dedication that the decision becomes obvious. Others labor for years in the role, slowly proving themselves worthy through accumulated small victories rather than sudden dramatic accomplishments. There is no set time frame, no checklist of requirements to fulfill. Instead, the existing companions simply watch, evaluate, and eventually agree that the whelp has become something more. The first contract, assigned to a whelp, is never random. The senior companions, often led by whomever serves as the primary training master at the time, select jobs that test specific qualities essential to companion life. The whelp might be sent to clear a troublesome animal from a farm, not a contract that brings glory or significant payment, but one that reveals whether they can follow orders precisely, whether they can interact with clients respectfully, whether they complete the job thoroughly or cut corners. Another whelp might find themselves assigned to protect a caravan through dangerous territory, a test of vigilance and stamina rather than direct combat prowess. The variety of these first contracts is intentional. The companions are not merely seeking skilled fighters, though skill with blade or bow is certainly valued. They seek individuals who embody the Nordic virtues of honor, courage, and community, values that cannot be tested in the training yard alone. Proving valor before the companions requires more than simply surviving combat. It requires choosing the harder path when an companion's easier one presents itself, requires standing firm when retreat would be tactical, requires protecting those weaker than oneself, even when no contract demands it. The stories told in Jorrvaskr's main hall remember companions who threw themselves before blows meant for their shield siblings, who chose to face down superior numbers rather than abandon civilians, who walked into certain death because their honor demanded it. These are the deeds that earn recognition, that transform a competent fighter into a true companion. The formal recognition ceremony itself is brief. A few words from the Harbinger, a toast raised in the main hall with all present, and the acknowledgement that the whelp now sits among them as equal. But brief does not mean insignificant, and those who receive this recognition speak of it with pride for the rest of their lives, however long or short those lives may be. The organization of Jorrvaskr reflects the companion's values through every detail of daily life. Sleeping quarters are assigned not by rank or seniority, but by practical considerations and the honor system. The private quarters belong to the circle, yes, but this is not privilege born of arrogance. It is recognition that those who carry the weight of leadership and the burden of the beast blood require space for private counsel and transformation. The other companions share the common sleeping area, bedrolls arranged along the walls of the lower level, and no one complains because they all began in those same bedrolls. The Harbinger's quarters stand separate, a small room that carries the accumulated weight of every decision made within its walls, every sleepless night spent wrestling with the burden of leadership without authority, of guiding without commanding. The main hall operates according to hierarchy, but it is a hierarchy of respect rather than rigid protocol. At the head table, the Harbinger sits if one has been chosen, flanked by the circle. The remaining companions arrange themselves along the long tables according to their own preferences, though tradition suggests that those who have served longest or proven themselves most capable in recent contracts receive positions of honor. During feasts, and the companions feast often, for what good is earning coin through contract work if not to celebrate survival and success? The seating becomes less formal, though the Harbinger's seat remains sacrosanct even if empty. Food is served by whoever volunteered or was assigned the duty, for even the most fearsome warrior among them understands that maintaining Jorrvaskr requires everyone to contribute to its daily function. If you're still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. The training yard behind Jorrvaskr operates on a schedule known to every companion through observation and participation rather than any posted roster. Dawn sees the earliest risers taking their places, usually those who have drunk too much mead the night before and seek to sweat out the lingering effects, or those who find sleep elusive, often circle members wrestling with the beast blood's restless energy. The yard is dominated by practice dummies that have been repaired and rebuilt so many times that no original wood remains, each board and beam a replacement for something broken by sword strike or warhammer blow. The rhythm of training is constant, the thud of blade on shield, the grunt of exertion, the sharp commands of whatever companion has taken it upon themselves to drill the newer members in proper form. Vilkas claims the training yard most mornings, his preference for two-handed weapons evident in every lesson he delivers. He moves through the forms with the kind of precision that comes only from decades of practice, his greatsword tracing arcs through the air that seem effortless despite the weapon's weight. When he trains others, he is demanding without cruelty, expecting them to push beyond their perceived limits, but never asking more than they can reasonably give. His brother Farkas often joins him, and watching the twins spar is to witness a conversation conducted entirely in steel. They know each other's movements so intimately that their combat resembles a brutal dance more than actual fighting. The younger companions watch these sessions when they can, learning not just technique but philosophy, understanding that mastery comes not from strength alone, but from the marriage of strength and skill and endless repetition. Athos takes the opposite approach, favoring the one-handed blade and moving with a speed that contradicts his elven heritage's usual stereotype of magical affinity over martial prowess. He drills his students in the importance of footwork, of positioning, of creating and exploiting openings in an opponent's defense. Where Vilkas teaches the devastating overhead strike that can shatter shields and bones alike, Athos teaches the precise thrust between ribs, the slash across the hamstring that ends a fight without necessarily ending a life. Both approaches are valid in the companion's eyes, both necessary, for contracts sometimes require the overwhelming display of force and sometimes demand the subtle application of just enough violence to resolve the situation. The companions do not charge formal training fees to their own members. The knowledge passes freely within Jorrvaskr's walls, another tradition stretching back to when Ysgramor taught his 500 the ways of Nordic warfare. To hoard knowledge, to demand payment for teaching those who share your mead hall and your battles, would be to corrupt the very foundation upon which the companions stand. Weapons and armor maintenance duties rotate among all companions, regardless of rank or experience. Even the circle members take their turn oiling blades and checking armor straps, for the companions understand that a warrior who cannot maintain their own equipment is a warrior who has grown too proud, too dependent on others, too separated from the reality that in battle, your life depends on the edge you put on your blade the night before. The smell of weapon oil permeates the lower level of Jorrvaskr, mingles with the scent of leather being worked supple again, after hardening in rain or snow, with the metallic tang of whetstones grinding against steel. Young companions learn quickly that their equipment is their responsibility, that no excuse suffices for a dull blade or a cracked shield strap. The lesson is harsh but necessary. Taught once when a now companion's sword shattered against a bandit's armor because he had neglected to check for metal fatigue, had trusted to luck instead of diligence. He survived, barely, but the scar across his face ensures he never forgets the lesson, and he passes it to every whelp who shows signs of similar carelessness. The Skyforge looms above Jorrvaskr like a guardian or a judge, its fires burning with heat that seems to exceed mere coal and wood, fed by something deeper. Eorland Greymane tends those fires with the dedication of a priest serving a demanding god, and in some ways, this is exactly what he does. His position among the companions is unique. He is not a warrior, takes no contracts, swears no oath to fight beside them, yet his status approaches that of the circle itself. Without Eorland, the companions would still have weapons and armor, but they would not have Skyforge steel, that superior material that holds an edge better than standard iron or steel, that seems to carry within its folded layers some quality that cannot be entirely explained by metallurgical knowledge alone. Access to Skyforge steel operates on an informal hierarchy that everyone understands but no one has codified. The circle receives priority, their weapons forged or reforged when requested without question of payment beyond the cost of materials. Full companions can commission pieces from Eorland, though they typically wait until they have proven themselves thoroughly, until they have earned enough coin to afford the materials, and until they have a genuine need rather than simple desire. Whelps must content themselves with standard steel or iron until they achieve full companion status, the waiting serving as yet another incentive to prove their worth. The Skyforge's mysterious properties remain unexplained even by Eorland, who knows the forge more intimately than any living soul. He speaks of how the fire burns hotter than it should, how metal worked at the Skyforge responds differently than metal worked at any other forge in Skyrim, how blades quenched in its waters seem to sing with a tone that standard steel cannot match. Ceremonial weapon commissioning follows traditions that blend the practical with the sacred. When a companion achieves some great deed, slaying a dragon, ending a blood feud that threatened to consume an entire hold, surviving against impossible odds, they may request that Eorlund forge a weapon to commemorate the achievement. These weapons receive special attention, their hilts wrapped in leather from the beast slain or enemy defeated, their blades inscribed with Nordic runes that spell out the deed in the angular alphabet of Ysgramor's time. Such weapons become heirlooms, passed down through shield sibling lines, or donated to Jorrvaskr's armory, where they hang on the walls alongside the weapons of legendary companions from centuries past. To see these weapons is to read the companion's history in steel and blood, to understand that every blade tells a story, and every story ends in either glory or death, sometimes both. Reforging traditions maintain that a blade broken in honorable combat deserves a second life. When a companion's weapon shatters in battle, when the steel finally surrenders to stress and force, the pieces are collected with reverence and brought to Eorlund. He melts them down, purifies the metal, and reforges them into something new. Sometimes the same weapon recreated, sometimes something different if the companion's needs have changed. The reforged blade carries within it the memory of every battle the original fought, or so the companions believe. And warriors who carry reforged weapons speak of feeling connected to their past selves, to the battles they survived, to the enemies they defeated. Whether this is genuine spiritual connection or merely psychological comfort, none can say with certainty, but the tradition continues regardless. Managing the beast blood requires constant vigilance and careful protocols that the circle guards jealously. The transformation into werewolf form is not entirely controllable, especially for newly turned circle members who have not yet learned to master the beast within. The full moon pulls at them with particular strength, and on those nights the circle ensures that anyone who might struggle to maintain control is either kept within the Underforge, where transformation can occur safely, or sent into the wilds, where they can hunt without risking exposure. The hunting ground territories are understood rather than mapped, stretches of wilderness, far from farms and settlements, where a werewolf can run and kill and feed without endangering innocents or revealing the circle's secret. The beast blood brings strength and speed and healing beyond normal human capability, but it also brings hunger, a hunger that deer and wolf and bear can satisfy only partially, a hunger that whispers of easier prey, softer prey, the kind that walks on two legs and screams when caught. Resisting this hunger is perhaps the greatest trial the circle faces, greater than any contract or combat, for it is a trial that never ends, that renews itself with every transformation. Some circle members master the control quickly, their strong wills allowing them to transform and fight and hunt without losing themselves to the beast. Others struggle for years, and some never fully master it, remaining always partially beast even in human form, their tempers shorter, their instincts sharper, their dreams filled with the memory of the hunt. The Underforge rituals extend beyond the initial blood-sharing ceremony that creates new werewolves. The circle gathers there during new moons to share knowledge of controlling the transformation, to discuss close calls and successful hunts, to remind each other of why they accepted the curse and what they must do to prevent it from consuming them entirely. Ayla, the huntress, speaks often during these gatherings, for she alone among the current circle embraces the beast blood without reservation or regret, sees it as gift rather than curse, hunts with joy rather than necessity. Her perspective provides balance to Kodlak's increasing desperation to find a cure, to Vilkas's grim acceptance, to Farkas's simple acknowledgement that the beast is part of him now, whether he likes it or not. The cure-seeking protocols that Kodlak initiated represent a departure from centuries of circle tradition. For generations, the beast blood was accepted as the price of power, the burden that came with circle membership, and no one seriously sought to remove it. Kodlak's research into Glenmoral witches and their ability to cure lycanthropy represents both hope and heresy to different circle members. Ayla opposes any cure categorically, viewing the beast blood as the greatest gift the companions possess, the edge that separates them from mere mercenaries and soldier. Vilkas remains uncertain, recognizing the curse's dangers but also its advantages. The disagreement has created tension within the circle, a fracture that grows wider as Kodlak's health fails, and as desperation increases. Contract distribution follows patterns established over centuries of operation, refined through trial and error, until the system functions with the smoothness of a well-maintained sword sliding from its sheath. Jobs arrive at Jorrvaskr through multiple channels, directly from clients who visit the mead hall, through word of mouth and reputation, through messages sent by courier, and occasionally through personal requests from jarls or other powerful figures. When a contract arrives, it is assessed by the Harbinger, or, in the Harbinger's absence or incapacity, by the senior most available circle member. The assessment considers multiple factors: the danger involved, the reputation of the client, the nature of the work, and whether it aligns with companions' values. The companions do not accept every contract offered, regardless of payment. Work that involves assassination is refused categorically. The companions are warriors, not murderers, and they draw a sharp distinction between killing in honorable combat and killing through stealth or poison. Contracts that require them to act against innocent parties, to enforce unjust claims, or to serve as tools of oppression are similarly declined. This selectivity costs them coin, certainly, but it preserves their reputation as honorable warriors rather than hired thugs. The companions have survived for 500 years precisely because they maintained this distinction, because they understood that short-term profit means nothing if it destroys the long-term foundation of respect and honor upon which their entire organization rests. Payment negotiations are typically handled by the Harbinger or senior circle members, though any companion can negotiate their own contract. If they brought in the job themselves, the standard practice is to quote a fair price based on the contract's difficulty and danger, then hold firm on that price. The companions do not haggle like merchants in the market, do not reduce their fees to undercut competition, and do not inflate prices to exploit desperate clients. This straightforward approach occasionally costs them contracts, particularly when clients shop around for the cheapest option, but it also builds trust among those who value honesty over bargaining. Many clients return to the companions repeatedly, precisely because they know what to expect, know the price quoted will be the price charged, know the job will be completed as promised, or the companions will die trying. Reputation-based job access creates an internal hierarchy of opportunity. The most dangerous and prestigious contracts go to proven companions, those who have demonstrated not merely skill but also judgment and reliability. Whelps receive the simple jobs, the grunt work that builds experience without risking their lives unnecessarily. Mid-level companions take contracts appropriate to their growing abilities, gradually working toward the kind of major jobs that make reputations and earn significant coin. This system ensures that companions are not sent to their deaths through inexperience, that each warrior faces challenges appropriate to their capabilities, that the organization's reputation remains intact through consistent, successful contract completion. Emergency contract protocols exist for situations requiring immediate response. When a dragon attacks a settlement, when bandits threaten a major trade route, when disaster strikes and martial aid is needed urgently, the companions respond without the usual assessment period. The Harbinger can authorize immediate deployment, or, in the Harbinger's absence, any circle member can make the call. These emergency responses are often conducted pro bono or for reduced payment, reflecting the companion's understanding that their presence in Skyrim carries responsibilities beyond mere profit. They are not merely a mercenary company, they are a Nordic institution, and Nordic institutions support Nordic communities in times of crisis. Pro bono work traditions extend beyond emergency response. The companions regularly take contracts from those who cannot afford their standard fees, farmers whose livestock is threatened by wolves, villages plagued by minor bandit groups, widows seeking protection during dangerous journeys. These contracts are distributed among companions as training opportunities or as reminders of why they fight. Coin is necessary for Jorrvaskr's maintenance and the companion's survival, but coin alone does not create the kind of reputation that has sustained the organization for half a millennium. That reputation rests on stories told in taverns and around fires, stories of companions who helped when help was needed regardless of payment, who embodied the Nordic ideal of the strong protecting the weak. The Harbinger's advisory role operates through a complex balance of formal and informal mechanisms. Formally, the Harbinger has no authority to command. The companions are free warriors who accept or decline contracts as they choose, who come and go from Jorrvaskr as their own desires dictate. Informally, the Harbinger's word carries weight that approaches command, for a Harbinger is chosen specifically because other companions already follow their lead naturally. When Kodlak suggests a course of action, when he advises caution or urges boldness, the companions listen because his judgment has proven sound over decades of service. This influence, without authority, is perhaps the most Nordic of all leadership styles, reflecting a culture that values individual freedom while recognizing the necessity of coordinated action. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these whispered tales from Tamriel, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Skyrim lores. Circle consultation requirements blur the line between obligation and courtesy in ways that outsiders would find confusing, but that every companion understands instinctively. When the Harbinger faces a decision affecting the entire organization, whether to accept a particularly dangerous contract, whether to involve the companions in political disputes between jarls, whether to change long-standing traditions, the circle must be consulted. This is not written in any charter, not enforced by any penalty beyond the weight of tradition itself, but no Harbinger in recorded history has made such decisions without gathering the circle's counsel. The consultation typically occurs in the lower level of Jorrvaskr, away from the other companions' hearing, around a table scarred by generations of fists pounding emphasis into arguments, cups slammed down in frustration daggers stabbed into wood to make a point. The deliberations are rarely brief. The circle debates with the passion of those who know their words carry consequences measured in lives, in the organization's future, in the preservation or destruction of traditions older than any living Nord. Kodlak leads these discussions with patience, allowing each circle member to speak their mind fully, never cutting short an argument even when he disagrees with its premise. Ayla speaks for embracing the beast blood's power, for aggressive action, for remembering that the companions are warriors first and diplomats never. Vilkas argues for pragmatism, for considering consequences, for understanding that honor means nothing if the companions are destroyed pursuing it. Farkas says little, but his words carry weight when he does speak, for his observations cut through complexity to simple truths that others miss in their elaborate reasoning. Skjor, before his death, always pushed for action over contemplation, for trusting instinct over analysis. The debates can stretch for hours, sometimes extending across multiple nights as circle members consider arguments, sleep on them, return with fresh perspectives or reinforced convictions. There is no voting, no counting of hands raised in favor or opposition. Instead, the discussion continues until either consensus emerges or until the Harbinger makes a final decision bearing the weight of all counsel received. Even when circle members disagree with the ultimate choice, they abide by it, for to do otherwise would fracture the organization beyond repair. The circle's unity, even in disagreement, provides the foundation that allows the companions to function as more than a collection of individual warriors pursuing their own interests. Precedent weighs heavily in companion decision-making, though not so heavily that it prevents adaptation when circumstances demand it. When the circle debates a course of action, someone inevitably references how similar situations were handled in the past. What did Harbinger Askar do when faced with this choice? How did the circle respond during the war between holds? What traditions guided the companions through previous crises? The appeal to precedent serves multiple purposes. It connects current companions to their predecessors across centuries. It provides tested solutions to recurring problems, and it reminds everyone that their choices will become precedent for future generations. This awareness of historical continuity prevents rash decisions made in the heat of the moment, forces consideration of long-term consequences rather than merely immediate concerns. Yet precedent alone cannot govern an organization that has survived for 500 years through periods of dramatic change. Skyrim in the Fourth Era is not Skyrim in the First Era, and the companions have evolved accordingly. The shift from Ysgramor's conquest focused 500 to a contract-based warrior organization required abandoning precedents that no longer served. The acceptance of non-Nords into the companions, a change that must have seemed radical when first proposed, demonstrates that tradition can adapt without dissolving entirely. The current circle includes elves, a reality that would have horrified Ysgramor's original warriors who sailed from Atmora specifically to avenge the elves' massacre of Sarthal. This tension between honoring the past and adapting to the present runs through every significant companion decision. The balance is delicate, maintained through the understanding that tradition exists to serve the companions, not the other way around. When traditions become obstacles to survival or honor, they must be reconsidered. When adaptation threatens core values, it must be resisted. The wisdom lies in distinguishing between the two, in recognizing which elements of companion identity are essential and which are merely historical. The beast, blood itself, represents this tension perfectly. It is a relatively recent addition to companion tradition, adopted perhaps 200 or 300 years ago when the Circle first encountered the possibility of controlled lycanthropy. Yet it has become so embedded in Circle identity that many members cannot imagine the organization's leadership without it. Kodlak's quest for a cure challenges this newer tradition, asking whether something that has existed for centuries, but not from the beginning, deserves the same weight as Ysgramor's original vision. Death comes for all companions eventually, whether in honorable battle or ignominious accident, whether young and full of promise or old and ready for rest. The funeral rites reflect both Nordic tradition and companion-specific customs, blended into ceremonies that honor the dead while reinforcing the values of the living. When a companion falls, their body is brought back to Jorrvaskr if at all possible, carried by their shield siblings if they had sworn such bonds, or by whatever companions are available if they had not. The body lies in state in Jorrvaskr's main hall, positioned before the great fire so that all who enter can see and pay respects. Weapons are arranged around the deceased, their personal arms, plus weapons borrowed from Jorrvaskr's collection to represent the full arsenal of Nordic warfare. The vigil lasts 1 full day and night, during which companions take turns standing watch over the body, ensuring it is never left alone, just as a shield sibling would never abandon their partner in battle. During the vigil, visitors from Whiterun and beyond may come to pay respects, and the companions welcome them regardless of whether they knew the deceased, for a warrior's death concerns not just their immediate companions, but the entire community that benefited from their service. The stories begin during the vigil, companions gathering in small groups to remember the dead, to share tales of battles fought together, contracts completed, mistakes made, and lessons learned. These stories serve multiple purposes. They honor the deceased by ensuring their deeds are remembered. They provide comfort to the grieving, and they pass lessons to younger companions who listen and learn from the experiences of those who have gone before. The funeral pyre is constructed on the plains outside Whiterun, within sight of Jorrvaskr, but far enough from the city that the flames pose no danger. The construction follows ancient patterns, with wood arranged to ensure hot, complete burning, with spaces left for air to feed the flames. The deceased is carried to the pyre at sunset, surrounded by all companions who can attend, along with anyone else who wishes to witness the ceremony. The body is placed atop the pyre, still wearing armor and holding weapons, for the companions believe that warriors should enter Sovngarde as they lived, armed, and ready for battle. Personal effects that the preacher, deceased valued highly, are added to the pyre as well, though items of significant practical value might be set aside for inheritance if the deceased had expressed such wishes. The Harbinger speaks first, if one has been chosen, or the senior circle member if the position stands vacant. The words are not standardized. Each funeral receives its own eulogy, tailored to the individual being honored. But certain themes recur: the companion's courage, their loyalty, their service to Skyrim and its people, their embodiment of Nordic values. The speech concludes with the traditional acknowledgement that the deceased now travels to Sovngarde to feast and fight alongside Ysgramor and the ancient heroes, to await the day when living companions will join them in Shor's Hall. Whether this belief is literally true or merely comforting mythology, none can say with certainty, but the companions speak of Sovngarde with conviction and their conviction lends strength to those who mourn. After the Harbinger speaks, any companion who wishes may speak briefly, though the tendency is toward brevity rather than lengthy orations. Nords prefer action to words, and funeral speeches that extend too long begin to feel like dishonoring the deceased through excessive sentimentality. Once the speaking concludes, the pyre is lit by the Harbinger or senior circle member, the torch thrust into the kindling that catches and spreads until the entire structure blazes against the darkening sky. Companions stand witness as the fire consumes the body, as smoke rises toward the stars, as the physical remains of their comrade transform into ash and memory. The watching can last hours, depending on the pyre's construction and the wind's cooperation, and companions rarely leave before the fire has burned down to coals. Weapon inheritance follows complex protocols that blend practical necessity with symbolic meaning. If the deceased had a shield sibling, that sibling receives first claim on weapons and armor, can choose to keep items for personal use or distribute them among other companions as they see fit. If no shield sibling existed, the deceased's weapons typically return to Jorrvaskr's general armory, available for any companion to use. Particularly significant weapons, those that had belonged to the deceased for many years, those that had been specially forged to commemorate great deeds, those that carried names and histories of their own, might be hung on Jorrvaskr's walls as memorials rather than returned to active service. These mounted weapons serve as permanent reminders of fallen companions, their presence ensuring that new generations learn the names and deeds of those who came before. Memorial practices extend beyond the immediate aftermath of death. On certain feast days throughout the year, the companions gather to remember all those who have fallen, speaking their names aloud to ensure they are not forgotten, sharing stories both grand and small. The newest companions learn that the warrior who held Jorrvaskr's record for most consecutive contract completions without injury died protecting a child from a saber cat, that the smith who preceded Eorlund's father crafted the finest blades any living companion had seen, but died falling, drunk down Jorrvaskr's stairs. These stories, both heroic and mundane, paint a complete picture of companion life. The glory and the absurdity, the courage and the human frailty that exists even among the greatest warriors. Posthumous honors are granted rarely and only for truly exceptional deeds. A companion who dies saving others, who achieves victory against impossible odds, who embodies companion values so perfectly that their life becomes legend. Such individuals might have their name carved into Jorrvaskr's main support beam, added to the list of legendary companions whose deeds echo through centuries. The carving is done by Eorlund himself, for no one else is trusted to cut into the ancient wood that has supported Jorrvaskr since Ysgramor's time. Each carving is small, just a name and perhaps a date, for the wood can only hold so many names across so many centuries. To have one's name carved into that beam is to achieve a kind of immortality, to become part of Jorrvaskr's physical structure, to be remembered as long as the hall itself stands. The Sovngarde aspiration that runs through all companion death rites reflects deeply held belief in Nordic afterlife. Cosmology. Shor's Hall of Heroes awaits those who die with honor, who lived courageously, who faced death without cowering. The companions believe this with such fervor that it shapes how they approach both life and death. A companion who feels death approaching often speaks of anticipation rather than fear, of finally seeing Sovngarde's mead hall, of testing their skills against the ancient heroes who wait there. This belief provides comfort in the face of mortality, but it also creates pressure to die well, to ensure that when death comes, it comes in circumstances worthy of Sovngarde's entrance requirements. The question of what constitutes a death worthy of Sovngarde troubles some companions. Is dying in bed from old age or disease sufficient if one lived honorably? Or must death come in battle, blade in hand, facing enemies, rather than succumbing to time's inevitable victory? The uncertainty breeds different responses. Some companions seek out dangerous contracts as they age, preferring to die fighting while still capable rather than risk a death they consider unworthy. Others maintain that a life lived according to companion principles ensures Sovngarde's welcome, regardless of death's specific circumstances. The debate has no official resolution, for the companions acknowledge that no living Nord can speak with certainty about Sovngarde's entrance requirements. The beast blood complicates Sovngarde aspirations significantly. Nordic tradition holds that those who die as werewolves, who bear the curse of Hircine, travel not to Sovngarde but to Hircine's hunting grounds, the Daedric realm where the hunt continues eternally. For Circle members who accepted the beast blood willingly, this fate represents an acceptable price for power. For those like Kodlak who view the curse with growing horror, it represents damnation, eternal separation from comrades and ancestors, service to a Daedric prince rather than reunion with Nordic heroes. The cure that Kodlak seeks is not merely about removing the beast blood's physical effects. It is about ensuring his soul's destination, about dying as a Nord rather than as Hircine's beast. Jorrvaskr itself stands as the greatest memorial to companion history, every timber and stone carrying weight beyond mere physical structure. The main support beam, carved with legendary names, the walls hung with weapons of the honored dead, the floors worn smooth by 500 years of boots crossing them. The fire pit that has burned continuously since the hall's construction, all of these elements combine to create a space where past and present exist simultaneously, a new whelp sleeping in. Jorrvaskr's lower level occupies the same space that Ysgramor's original 500 occupied, separated by centuries, but connected through unbroken tradition. The building reminds every companion that they are part of something larger than themselves, larger than their individual lives, part of a legacy that extends backward to Atmora and forward to however long Skyrim itself endures. The physical maintenance of Jorrvaskr is treated with reverence appropriate to a sacred structure. When repairs are needed, the work is done carefully, with attention to preserving original materials wherever possible. Modern companions do not carelessly replace ancient timbers with new wood, do not update the hall to reflect current architectural trends, do not alter the essential character of the space. They understand that Jorrvaskr's value lies partly in its continuity, in the fact that it remains fundamentally unchanged despite centuries of use. To modernize would be to sever connection with the past, to suggest that the present somehow surpasses or improves upon what came before, to commit the sin of arrogance that every Nordic parent warns their children against. The mead served in Jorrvaskr flows from barrels that occupy the same storage spaces they have occupied for generations, refilled from the same suppliers where possible, maintaining consistency across time. The taste of Jorrvaskr's mead has become so associated with companion identity that drinking it elsewhere feels wrong, feels like violation of a sacred ritual, even when the mead itself comes from the same source. Companions on extended contracts far from Whiterun speak of missing Jorrvaskr's mead. Specifically, not merely mead in general, and when they return, their first act is often to pour a cup and drink deeply, the familiar taste confirming that they have truly come home. The training methods passed down through companion generations preserve knowledge that might otherwise be lost. Techniques developed by warriors whose names are now forgotten, strategies that proved effective in battles no living Nord remembers. Adaptations made necessary by changes in weapons and armor technology. All of this accumulated wisdom continues through the master-student relationship that defines companion training. Vilkas teaches techniques he learned from his own instructors, who learned from theirs, creating chains of knowledge transmission extending back through decades or centuries. Some of what he teaches has been modified over time, adapted to account for new threats or new weapons, but the core principles remain constant. Balance, precision, awareness, courage tempered with caution. The companion's relationship with Whiterun's general population reflects their dual nature as both integrated community members and separate warrior caste. They shop in the city's markets, worship at the city's shrines when so inclined, drink in the city's taverns when they desire company beyond their shield siblings. Yet they also maintain distance, an understanding that they are not quite like other citizens, that their business is violence and death, even when conducted honorably, that their presence represents both protection and potential danger. The guards respect them while remaining slightly wary, knowing that any companion could likely best any guard in single combat, but trusting that the companion's honor prevents them from abusing this advantage. The merchants welcome their coin while remaining cautious in negotiation, understanding that cheating a companion would bring consequences beyond merely losing a customer. Children in Whiterun grow up seeing companions as figures of aspiration, warriors whose lives seem touched with glory despite, or perhaps because of, the constant proximity to danger. Young Nords dream of someday climbing Jorrvaskr's steps as whelps, of earning the right to call themselves companions, of having their deeds remembered in stories told around fires. Some of these children do eventually join, bringing youthful enthusiasm that must be tempered with realistic understanding of what companion life actually entails. Others discover that the dream exceeds their capability or desire, that being a companion requires sacrifices they are unwilling to make, and they find other paths through life while still respecting the organization they once aspired to join. The companion's future remains uncertain in these troubled times. Dragons have returned to Skyrim. Alduin himself soars above the throat of the world, and prophecy suggests the world itself approaches an ending. The civil war between Stormcloaks and Imperials threatens to tear Skyrim apart, regardless of which side achieves victory. The Thalmor's influence grows like poison through the land, corrupting what they cannot control, destroying what they cannot corrupt. In such times, the companions represent continuity, tradition, the stubborn Nordic refusal to surrender to despair or inevitability. They continue taking contracts, continue training new warriors, continue maintaining Jorrvaskr as though the world will persist indefinitely, as though their traditions will continue for another 500 years. Perhaps this is the greatest act of defiance available to them, to simply continue being companions, to maintain honor and courage and loyalty in a world where such values increasingly seem like luxuries civilization can no longer afford. Every contract completed, every whelp elevated to full companion status, every feast held in Jorrvaskr's hall represents a refusal to surrender to darkness and chaos, a statement that Nordic virtue persists, regardless of dragons or Daedra or the schemes of elves and emperors. The circle gathers still, the shield siblings swear their oaths still, the forge fires burn still. As long as Jorrvaskr stands, as long as warriors gather in its hall, seeking something beyond mere survival or profit, the self-companions endure, and endurance, perhaps more than glory or victory, defines what it means to be truly Nordic, to face impossible odds and continue fighting anyway, to suffer defeat and rise again, to know that death waits for all mortals, yet choose to live with honor regardless. The last light of sunset fades beyond the windows, and in Jorrvaskr the fires are stoked higher against the gathering dark. Companions gather for the evening meal, shield siblings sitting together, whelps listening eagerly to veterans' tales, the circle watchful even in rest. The mead flows, the food is shared, and for a few hours, the weight of tradition and duty and destiny lifts enough to allow simple companionship, simple pleasure in survival and community. Tomorrow will bring new contracts, new challenges, new threats to face with steel and courage. But tonight, Jorrvaskr stands warm against the cold, its doors open to any who have earned the right to call themselves companion, its timbers creaking with the weight of history and the promise of futures yet unwritten.